Okay, welcome back, fans. And this here is Harnessing Your Wealth with Billy and Cade. And our special guest today is in law enforcement. And we're welcoming Travis Lyman, who is a 28-year law force veteran with Layton City. And he's actually lieutenant. So he's been around the block a few times. We're glad to have him. And he's actually Cade's father-in-law. So Cade's got that over his head.
Yeah.
I think you better be careful, pal. You don't want to get in trouble here with Travis. Travis, thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate the invitation. And I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about some issues around law enforcement. It's an interesting time to be in this business for sure.
Yeah.
And at first, before we start, I want your listeners to know I just leaned into the donut joke and I showed up with donuts. So,
yeah, if you can see right there on the table, he brought a whole box of them. I mean, these guys, they definitely know what they're donuts.
That's right.
They're Krispy Kreme donuts, so he's not messing around. I guess, are you going to take those with you when you leave, or are you leaving?
No, I don't.
Wow.
I think I didn't buy a box for myself. Those ones are for you. Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. Well, Travis, give us a little bit of background. How did you get into law enforcement, and what made you choose that profession?
Well, I don't have the story where I thought, my whole childhood I wanted to be a police officer or anything like that. It wasn't like that at all. I didn't know any police officers. I had very little, I'm not going to say none, but very little interaction with police officers growing up. And it really just wasn't on my radar at all until I got to college. And like I think a lot of young people do, I was looking around at what classes to take and saw some criminal justice classes that looked interesting. And the more I got into that, the more it sparked an interest. And I thought, I could see myself doing this. So that's really where it started, was just in college, taking some classes related to law enforcement that really kind of spoke to me. And that's how I ended up thinking, I want to do that. So I started, right before I graduated from school, I started applying for some different police departments. Didn't get hired at some because I had no idea what I was doing or what I was talking about in those interviews. But I ended up applying at Layton and had never been to that city before I turned in an application there. But it worked out and I couldn't be happier. It's been an extremely rewarding career and a good place to work.
Awesome. So when you were hired as a policeman right off the bat, went through all the training?
Yeah, I went to the police academy and then started as a patrol officer, responding to calls for service. When people call the police needing help, that's who responds, as patrol officers. And that's the core function of a police department. And so that's where everybody starts, is responding in a patrol capacity. And that's how you learn to be a cop, really.
Interesting. You've worked your way up to lieutenant. And what would you say are the keys to becoming lieutenant, like with the stepping stones? What made that happen for you?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think the thing that served me the best was just making myself indispensable to the organization and doing things that just made my supervisors and the people making decisions about promotions, leaving them with no choice really, but to make the decision to promote me. I honestly had an administrator that was in the decision-making chain for promotions that did not like me. He and I had major conflict. We had a personality conflict and we just did not get along at all. And, I thought that might hamper my opportunities, but I just put my head down and made myself indispensable to the organization and made it so that really it was an obvious choice, I felt. But when I tested for a sergeant and my first promotion, it was against, and I was competing with officers who had been my field training officers, people who had trained me just a few years earlier. And that was pretty intimidating because I really looked up to those guys. They'd been there much longer than I had. They had a lot more experience, were older than I was. I started in this job when I was, 23 years old. I was a kid. I hardly knew anything about life, let alone, the decisions, the significant decisions you have to make in this profession. So, I was competing against people that who I really looked up to, and performed well enough in the promotional process to get that first promotion to a sergeant. And I actually had a funny. I look back now and think it was funny. At the time, I was pretty disappointed in it. But the very first shift that I showed up to work in a supervisor capacity, I showed up and I was going to be doing a shift briefing for the officers that were now working for me, which a couple of days before that had been my peers working with me, some of which were my training officers, guys that I talked about before. I showed up to the department. I walked into the mailroom to get everything out of my mailbox before the shift started and before I went in to do my first shift briefing. And there in my mailbox was a tube of chapstick, used chapstick, in my mailbox. And I really could only look at that, interpret that as somebody who was upset that I had gotten a promotion over them was implying that I had kissed somebody's butt to get this job.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
And I thought, you know what?
Butt kisser.
Yeah. And at the time, it rattled me a little bit. I thought, here we go. This is going to be fun. I look back now and think it's actually kind of funny, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to, to take on a responsibility like that, supervising people who had taught me how to do the job.
Right.
Yeah.
Leadership is earned.
Yeah.
It's not given, right? It's probably never more apparent than in your profession.
Yeah, I think so. And just because people get a leadership position doesn't make them leaders either. They can be good managers and they can keep track of things and stay on budget and those types of things. But to actually lead people is a whole different thing. And, I feel like I've been good at that at times and maybe not so good at other times, but it's managed to get me where I'm at now, 28 years later. That's hard to believe saying that out loud.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Is being a cop, is it a lot like Beverly Hills Cop, the movie, where everybody's pranking everybody all the time?
No. There are components of that. And honestly, in our profession, we have to be able to laugh at situations sometimes just to be able to navigate them and get through some of the heavy things that we deal with. And there are funny things that occur. So there's some of that, but I think people would be surprised at how serious we take our responsibility. The stakes are just high for the decisions that we are entrusted to make. They have major impacts on people's lives. Decisions about whether somebody's going to get arrested or charged with something or taken to jail, or even a citation for speeding has a big impact on people's lives.
Right.
And that's not lost on the majority of the people in my profession. Certainly the people that I work with at my agency, we talk about that all the time, the magnitude of the decisions that we have to make and how we need to get them right. And so, we're lighthearted at times, but people I think would be surprised at how serious we take that responsibility.
Travis, what's your greatest challenge, you would say, as a police officer?
I think probably the greatest challenge I experienced was the demands on my time, being able to try and balance being there for my kids and the things at home versus having to work a lot of overtime and sometimes 2 and at times even 3 jobs and overtime just to try and, live the lifestyle that I wanted to be able to provide for my family. That was a real challenge at times and put a strain on both my work life and home life. And I think most police officers experience that because most end up having to do something similar where they're working a couple of jobs to live the lifestyle that they want to live. It's different. It's better now, certainly, than it was when I started. Wages have increased, and law enforcement is viewed more as a profession, I think, now, even though it's a unique time to be in this business, and there's a lot of criticism of us. I think the public and certainly the community I work in recognizes that with regard to pay specifically, we need to pay police officers as professionals and then hold them to the standard of being a profession and a professional. That's what that's what communities need in police officers. And if they, you know, historically maybe didn't recognize that and pay accordingly, they sometimes got, you know, got what they paid for. I don't know. It feels, I don't love saying it that way, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
I think with all the challenges that come with a career that you're in, you have to do a lot of training, right? Constant training, even when you're already 28 years into the business. So funny story I'll share really quick. When I was just dating Morgan, been sitting there, and I wasn't at that point talking too much when I was with your family, just observing mostly.
Yeah.
But
Taking the
I heard
road.
I heard a story about multiple times where Morgan and her siblings, Parker, Abby, and Caden, would be volunteered to go to these trainings at the mall where they would do a school shooter training, and they would be the victims. And they'd been saying, "Get ready, Cade, because you're going to be a victim. You're going to get shot in the mall."
Yeah.
I was like, what am I getting myself into here? But
yeah, we have not done that yet. But next time we do it, I know who I'm
soon,
calling. Yeah.
You'd probably take that literally, though.
Oh,
terrified. This is how we was. We raised this kid from a young age, and whenever he heard about shootings, fires, food poisonings, he was convinced that those things were going to come after him. So it was like a nonstop battle just to calm his mind down. To him, no, you're fine. Go watch the news, Cade. He'd walk by the TV and see something on the news, and he'd be terrified for 2 weeks straight.
Well, my kids maybe have the opposite extreme. They've been indoctrinated into it, I guess, so much, and kind of desensitized to some of that stuff.
I'll bet they've seen and heard a lot.
I've tried to not have that be the case where I can, but it's just inevitable that, you know, they're going to hear conversations and see things. And my responsibilities with the media now, where I'm on the news sometimes with cases that the news comes asking about, they see all that stuff too. So it forces conversations that I maybe wouldn't have otherwise wanted to have at times. But
some tough conversations, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've dealt with all that kind of minor, trivial stuff.
Well, I hear that sometimes about places, you know, more rural places where their law enforcement does spend time worrying about those kinds of things. And I always think, you know, you should count yourself lucky that you work that you live in a place where that is the most significant thing that the police need to worry about. That's a good thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of, you know, kind of these calls and the things that you've seen and some of the bad situations you've been in, describe maybe what comes to mind as the scariest or maybe the most traumatic thing that you've witnessed in your career.
Yeah. You know, as far as the scariest, I can't really point to one incident in particular, other than I will say when I was a new officer, fresh off of training, so I no longer had a training officer in the passenger seat with me. I was all by myself. For the first several months, every time my number would get called by dispatch to get sent on a call, I was terrified. And I think a lot of police officers are. Maybe terrified is overstating it, but you're very nervous because at that time we didn't have navigation or anything. I wasn't even sure how I was going to get to the call in a hurry, let alone what I was going to do when I got there. So yeah, those were anxious times when I was a new officer, and probably some scared times too, thinking, oh my word, I have no idea how to navigate this situation, but I got to figure it out on the fly. And it matters to people that I get it right. So I'm going to lean on my fellow, you know, coworkers, and we're going to work through this and figure it out. But so those were scary times for sure. But, you know, it didn't take long for that to just turn into, with some confidence and competence in the job,
experience,
turn it into, it got to be a heck of a lot of fun. And there were times early in my career where I thought, man, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. I would come out here and do this for free. It was that much fun, you know, but as most careers, I think, progress, you get a few battle scars. And, you know, there are a couple of cases, I think in particular, a lot of cases that I look back on and think were pretty traumatic situations for the victims. And they had an impact on me and my coworkers too. But two, I think that I can think of in particular, that had an impact on me. One was I was a patrol officer, fairly new patrol officer. And one of the part-time assignments that I had to earn a little bit of extra money was I was also, I'd been trained to be a part-time crime scene investigator too. So when I wasn't on duty, I was on an on-call rotation to go help process crime scenes. And I took a call one day working patrol from a young teenage girl who had her car stereo stolen. Pretty benign situation, but a big deal to her. I met her in the Denny's parking lot in Layton and took this report, and she was really upset that she'd gotten this stereo stolen out of her car that meant a lot to her. It was a big deal. I didn't think a lot of it at the time and wasn't able to figure out who'd done it, but I took the report. And about 3 days later, I was on call for CSI and got called to a hanging and showed up at the house. The patrol officers that were out front said, yeah, it's a sad situation. It's a young girl and she's downstairs in the basement of this house. And it looks like she hung herself. We don't know. That's part of my responsibility at that time, to go down there and look at the scene and investigate and figure out what happened. But as I went down there, turns out it was that same girl who had, I don't think the car stereo was what prompted that or was the sole reason, but it was a factor that maybe was the last straw in, whatever she was going through. And so I spent the next couple of hours, inches from her face, photographing this situation and just thinking, oh my word, I was just talking to this girl a couple of days ago. I can't believe this happened.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of those kinds of things, but that one in particular, I think just because of the interaction I'd had with her briefly before that,
right,
really, really kind of stuck with me. Yeah. And there was another too that, a situation where I was, again, a young patrol officer working a graveyard shift, and a young lady called in and said that her roommate hadn't returned home. She'd actually gone fishing up in Ogden Canyon, mm-hmm. in the Ogden River by herself and hadn't returned home. And it was a graveyard shift, so if I recall, we didn't have a lot going on. But Ogden Canyon's not our jurisdiction. So I called Weber County, asked if they could send somebody up to take a look, see if they could see this lady's car up there maybe. And they called back a short time later and said, yeah, they had actually found this lady's car right near the Alaskan Inn in Ogden Canyon. Nobody was around. Her car was just there. But they were busy and didn't have time to look. So I got permission to go up there and ended up going up to Ogden Canyon and going out. It was the middle of the night, young officer, and was, making my way down, walking the river in the dark, looking for this girl. And sure enough, I found her. She had, I didn't know what had happened at the time. I didn't know if she'd been killed or what had happened, but turns out what had happened was she'd been fishing by herself, had slipped and fallen, hit her head on a rock, and drowned, died right there in the river, and had made her way down and got hung up on a little gravel bar. And so, the question was a scary situation. That was a little haunting and spooky to be standing out there with this lady, in the river. And
did something like that ever, like, you feel foul play, or do you immediately just kind of assume accident?
No, I think we more often than not have to assume foul play and then see if the facts and investigation prove that otherwise. Yeah. But at the time I had no idea what had happened, but it wasn't our jurisdiction. So I wasn't involved in the investigation, but it's a lot of years of situations like that. I think that as much as I think sometimes police officers want to say, no, it hasn't affected me. I'm the same person I was, when I started. I don't know how you can be after, and you really just do have to kind of compartmentalize those situations. And
you probably see some things like car accidents or things like that most people would not be able to get out of their head. Like, and maybe you can't either, but man, I mean, that's something that I always think about is, first responders or policemen, they're there at the scene. You have to go in, you have to look, you have to see what's going on, assess the situation. There was a case a few years ago. I don't remember the names, but I think these people were from Layton. And the situation was, I think it was a husband and wife, and they had a babysitter, and they were giving her drugs, and then they were having sex with this babysitter. And she ended up dying. And they ended up taking her, I think it was up Morgan County somewhere, and burying her.
Yeah, they disposed of her body up Weber Canyon, right off that first Mountain Green exit.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, Morgan County, but right off that first exit.
You remember that then? They were right in Layton, weren't they? Didn't they live there?
Yeah.
Wild. And I don't know what happened to those people. Hopefully they're still in prison.
Yeah, that was before I worked there, but I did hear about the case. Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Hearing some of the stories makes people like us even more frustrated when we see videos online now of people that are not respecting police officers. Mm-hmm. Someone's not complying. They won't roll their window down. They won't, talk to the police officers. And then everyone online said police brutality or something like that. And it's like frustrating for us. So how has that been for you with social media, cameras, and what kind of training has gone into educating officers to not fall into that trap?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I share in that same frustration with you. It's concerning to me, this insatiable appetite that it seems like our culture has. And I think it's just people. I don't think it's this country. I think it's everywhere. This insatiable appetite to be entertained at anyone's expense. Mm. It makes no difference. We'll laugh at anything now. And so that just fosters this, this machine of trying to find content to entertain people. And man, police interactions are, for some reason, fascinating to people and just feed into that. And so there's a big there's a big following out there of people who are looking to watch this type of content. And it's just gross to me, honestly, to see that as entertainment, people trying to bait the police and trying to incite these interactions that are going to turn ugly for the sake of YouTube views or something like video, that. It's outrageous.
Getting followers.
Yeah, we talk about that certainly in our industry, and in my department, we talk about, how important it is to not do that next thing that is going to go viral and make us all look silly, and just maintain that professionalism and not get baited into those interactions. There's a group of people that label themselves as First Amendment auditors, or some version of that will, under the guise of trying to make sure the police are doing things the right way, be very confrontational with the police, show up in police departments' lobbies, or, and ask questions that are trying to incite some sort of unprofessional response, that kind of thing. And it's pretty disheartening, honestly, that there's such an appetite for that type of content. It's just gross, really. Mm-hmm. I manage our department's social media. So I put out a lot of content that our department puts out. And I've taken a little different approach, I think, than some police departments have in this regard. I think some public safety police departments, fire departments have kind of gotten caught up in some of the ice bucket challenge or mannequin challenge or some of the goofiness that goes on social media. And it was put to me a way that I thought, yeah, that makes sense to me. Somebody said to me one time, I don't need my police department to be generating that type of content. My police department is dealing with grown-up problems, and I need them to be above that fray a little bit. And so we try and take that approach, at least in my department, where, we are dealing with serious issues, mm-hmm. and we want to have positive interactions with our community and build trust, but we'll let people find that kind of content somewhere else.
We were talking about it the other day, where it's impossible for some police officers in these interactions, because there's a football player. Some of you listeners probably familiar. Tyreek Hill is his name. There was a lot going on because he got arrested right before first game of the season. And I watched the video because I guess I fall into that trap too. And then I look at the comments and see what side people are on. So maybe I'm part of the problem. But he won't roll his window down. He's getting in trouble for reckless driving. He's not talking to the officers. His windows are so tinted that you can't see in there. And it's like, what as an officer are you supposed to do? Just let him not talk to you? Let him drive away? Oh, we're good. We don't want to get any backlash online. Just go ahead. Go ahead.
In the community that I work in, the vast majority of the time when I see the things that you're talking about, where people are just overtly disrespectful to the police for no real reason, the police aren't asking for anything unreasonable. They're asking the same thing they ask of anybody else in that situation, and they're just blatantly disrespectful about it. In my experience in the community that I work in, more often than not, I would say that is a direct product and result of, what they're seeing online, these interactions that they're viewing and seeing that, oh, it's kind of funny when they won't roll their window down, or when they,
I'm going to show them.
Yeah. When they flip the officer off as they drive by or something like that. That's different than I think some of the issues in some cities in America where there are legitimate problems that departments are having to work through, regarding trust and confidence in their police force.
Right. And we've all seen some of those videos where officer approaches a vehicle, and it's open fire on them. I mean, I can't imagine being in those kind of situations, because I know your blood pressure is probably already spiking a little bit. You're a little bit nervous. You're a bit apprehensive to approach, not sure who you're going to be dealing with, or the type of person you're going to be dealing with, their attitude toward you as a law enforcement person. Now I know there's bad apples, and they make it bad for everyone. And that happens in our industry, happens in the auto mechanic industry. Every industry has a bad apple that can taint the whole situation and make it hard for you to do your job well, because everyone looks at you with a suspicious eye. Like you're out to get me. You're kind of trying to screw me here. You're doing something that you shouldn't do. So we all have to overcome those challenges. But I think in your profession, it's so much more apparent and in your face, because we're seeing it nonstop. Everyone's got a phone. Everyone's got a camera flipped on, with the body cams from you police officers. And then if they don't work, of course, then there's a conspiracy going on. And so it's an amazing challenge. And I'm going to maybe move on to the next topic, but it was an interesting story. My brother, about 6 years ago, I believe, he was driving his truck heading toward Tremont. So he's going north on I-15. And there was a bulletin put out. I don't know what you all call these, but there was somebody with his profile driving a truck exactly matching that description that he owned. That just committed some sort of major crime, felony. I don't know what he'd done. But so anyway, somebody sees my brother driving that way, immediately call it in. All of a sudden, he's got 4 policemen on him and pulling him over. Okay, so my brother, he's a very quiet, very easygoing guy, and he pulls over and rolls his window down, doing the right thing. And they come and they say, "Step out of the car, step out of the truck." And so he opens the door and steps out, and they grab him and they slam him against the door, and then throw him onto the ground and handcuff him. And they've got their guns on him. He looked up and said he had one guy had his gun drawn, and he didn't even know what he'd done yet. No idea what had happened. Now the point is they'd assumed he was somebody he wasn't, but he complied. He wasn't disrespectful, and he was just submitting to what they needed. Now, maybe a little bit excessive force. Maybe they thought they had, really caught the bad guy. The point I'm making, though, is what would have happened if he would have resisted them right then and there? it could have turned into a very, very bad situation for him. So I tried to explain that to one of my former employees one time. And she said, I don't want my kids to come home in a body bag. And I said, so that's what you think now of all cops. So we want to get rid of all cops. Everyone's going to get killed if they get pulled over by a policeman. I said, how about we look at this story and this narrative, and how about we just start respecting them and show them, the respect that they deserve, and try to put ourselves in their shoes. If we were asked to go to a situation or to a dark alley or to a home that was being burglarized, what would you do? Who are you going to call to protect you? So I can see a little bit of both sides. Maybe sometimes cops get a little bit amped up, but I also can understand where they're coming from, because no one wants to put their life in danger, I don't think, without having the ability to protect themselves.
Yeah.
That's kind of just a couple of stories I wanted to throw out. You probably have some more comments around those things. What do you think this movement has created in the world?
Yeah. We police as a profession, we get it wrong sometimes. And sometimes it's right in front of a cell phone camera, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. Certainly our body cameras that we wear now are not a bad thing. Our officers fully embrace that, and are glad to have an accurate depiction, as much as that can accurately record and reflect a situation. They welcome that level of scrutiny and double checking and verifying. But we get it wrong sometimes, and we make big mistakes sometimes. And, there have been some situations that have turned into national news stories that we've gotten it wrong. And that's tough. That's tough for all of us to come to work the next day and realize that today's going to be one of those days where we're getting looked at sideways by everybody because of something that happened in Minneapolis or something that happened somewhere across the country. We cringe every time that happens. And I earlier said that I think people would be surprised about maybe a peek behind the curtain into a police department. This is one of those times too where I think people would be surprised. Generally, certainly in my organization, there would never be room for our officers to be intentionally going out and terrorizing people or victimizing people. It's quite the opposite. We are constantly harping on the need to provide good customer service and to do things the right way. But sometimes individuals get it wrong. And the part that I think people would be most surprised about is how accountable we hold ourselves. Now, this is not true everywhere. There are places around the country that I'm confident do sweep things under the rug and don't hold their officers accountable, but that is not the culture here. Certainly not in my department and the departments that I interact with. That is, people would be surprised at how much accountability there is internally that never was even known by the public. But little things that end up costing officers their certification, their jobs, when in many other professions that would never have been an issue. And it probably should be that way just because of the magnitude of the decisions that law enforcement have to make and the trust that's given to them. Yeah. We have to be held to that standard. And in my organization, we take that very seriously. But, I'm the first to acknowledge that are other places, and certainly even in my own organization, there have been times when we don't get it right, and we need to be transparent and own up to those times too.
And you go into great depth with your interview process as well. I've asked you about this before, and you look for any sort of red flag possible. Anyone that likes guns a little more than they should, or they're a little aggressive, those would be red flags and things that you would avoid. So just, I guess, putting a point out there that most police departments around here, at least, they have a pretty strict interview process, and they're not just letting in anybody. They want people to be accountable.
Somebody's watched a few too many video games and wants to get into the game itself. Live.
Yeah. You mentioned defunding the police and some of that narrative that had been going on the last few years. And we did not experience that directly where our city council was talking about reducing our budget or anything like that, which I think was fair because we're frugal and do a lot with a little. And we wouldn't have had a lot of room to provide the service we do if that had happened. But the one byproduct that we saw of that conversation nationwide was officers applying to our department and others around us, specifically in Utah. Not everywhere in Utah, but a lot of places in Utah, to get away from those cities where that was happening and where they felt like they didn't have the support of their city council or their mayor or sometimes their police chief. We actually saw a windfall of officers applying with a lot of good experience to come to work for us that wanted to work in an organization that had that support from their community and their administration, which unfortunate that that's how that happened, but we did benefit in that way from that. And we got good people that wanted to work in a good environment.
Is that kind of turned? Has the tide turned now? Do you think that movement has kind of shifted back and people are realizing that, hey, we really do value the police officers in our community?
Yeah, I think so. I think those places that did that, those cities that actually did that. I mean, I'd heard stories of cities who were just arbitrarily deciding we're going to cut 150 officers from the staff for no other reason than just that's a random arbitrary number they came up with to appease this pressure to defund the police. And those, from what I'm hearing now, those places that did that have realized how counterproductive that actually was. And if you want a better police force, you need to train them more. You need to put more effort into hiring good people. You need to pay them as professionals and hold them to a professional standard. And none of those things, while you can expect them to be efficient and not be wasteful, certainly with the taxpayers' money, some of those things do require, if you're going to pay people, you want them to be better trained. Just like any industry, you can't ask people to come in on their time off to do a lot of that kind of thing. And so it does cost money, but places that were doing that, I think, quickly realized that it was counterproductive. People were leaving the department.
Crime was increasing. All the predictable things. And so I think the pendulum has swung back and people are realizing we can look at police departments' budgets, but we just need to and ask them to be efficient. But cutting them arbitrarily was not the answer. Yeah. Kind of scary for some people who want to continue to live in some of those big cities. And I think we all know the cities that we're speaking of, the impact those cities saw. And if there are going to be any young police officers choosing to move into those professions to take over for the folks who are either deciding to just hang up the towel or move to different cities, like you mentioned, that's going to be an interesting story to tell, over the next few years to see how those changes impact quality of life in some of those cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, LA, New York. I don't know. I'm just naming some that are in the news quite a bit with the crime that has spiked. And then I know this gets into the political. There's a lot of politics, especially right now with the election coming up. We're talking about illegal immigration or illegal immigrants and crimes that they're committing. Of course, they escalate to the top of the list, and a lot's going on behind that. So with the increase in some of these people coming into our country, does that call for more police officers?
Boy, yeah, that's a big one to tackle. I think just intuitively, I would say that it has to, in the sense that, if we're talking about people who are entering the country illegally, that in and of itself is a crime. and Border Patrol and places that are dealing with those issues need help and need more people and need support politically to be able to tackle those issues. The trickle down effect, are we seeing in my community a lot more crime committed by illegal immigrants? No, but I don't live on a border town either, so I can't really speak to that. There's a lot going on all the time. Some by people with that status, some, a lot by people who were born and raised in this country that are just criminals. And so, there's just a lot of it going on all the time. And I don't see that being a significant factor or dynamic in the place that I work.
Where you're at.
Yeah.
What you've seen some of the video, maybe the news cycle going on with the issue in Colorado. What was it, Aurora, where I think there was group of people, illegals, who just took over a apartment complex or hotel. Did you see this? Mm-hmm. Did you see that, Travis?
I didn't. No, I'm not familiar with that story.
I'm just wondering what a police department would do, because over there they're basically just like hands off. They're not going to even do anything. These guys have guns. They have, AK-47s.
Wow.
They basically just commandeered the whole place. And I don't know how much of this is just kind of sensationalism with media, but that scares people. And they start talking to other citizens of these areas who are now talking, "Hey, I'm getting out of here. I can't live like this anymore." I never thought we'd be talking about that kind of stuff in our country, but apparently we are. It's interesting. But as a policeman, I guess you're going to see all kinds of things, and I guess you just need to expect the unexpected sometime.
Yeah.
What might come along. We just never know.
Yeah. That's a big part of our training for new officers is that, and that's what leads to what you were referencing earlier, and both of you talking about that. Sometimes officers come off as being paranoid, or, why are you shining your flashlight in my face? And, all those kinds of things. But it's a challenge to balance safety and not getting hurt in this line of work and being able to protect other people versus, a soft, warm and fuzzy approach that people sometimes would prefer. That's just tough. It's a hard thing to balance. And with some experience, you start to learn some of the nuance there. And some are just better at it than others. Some officers just are better at it. Like some are better financial advisors than others. It's just how our profession is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did confirm with Travis that Mike Latham made their badges. So
really?
That's right. I saw he was a previous guest of yours. Yeah, he's a good dude. I really like Mike. Yeah,
Mike is Mike does stuff for everybody, so he knows everybody too. So
yeah.
He's a big police officer supporter, and
I spent some time. I went back to the FBI National Academy and spent 3 months back in Quantico, Virginia, at some training. And there were 250 officers in my session from all over the world. And I was surprised how often I would see a coin or a badge of theirs and flip it over, and there it was, Symbol Arts. Yeah.
He's a machine.
Taking over the world.
He is a machine.
He does business in all 50 states.
Yep.
You watched our podcast, you would have heard that. But
yeah. So if you're listening right now, if you haven't watched that one, go right to that one next.
Yeah.
So maybe wrapping this up then, Travis, what would you say to a young person maybe listening to this who's maybe thinking about going into this line of work but has a little hesitation and uncertainty? What are the rewards, and why would they want to choose this as a career?
Yeah. Despite all the bad things we've talked about and all the heavy topics that we've covered, I think I'm still very optimistic about the future of this profession and the people that I see applying, coming and wanting to get into this line of work. I would tell young people that are considering it to really go into it with your eyes wide open about what it is. Do some research, talk to people who are in the profession, spend some time doing ride-alongs, those kinds of things, and make sure that you have a fair understanding of what it is that you're getting into. and make sure that's what you really, really want. And don't be surprised when an organization does the same with you and looks closely at, are you a good fit for us? Because departments just have to do that. We have to hire good people. So I would suggest that people who try to get into this line of work, more than being out trying to, do 50 push-ups or be able to shoot really well or any of those kind of things, drive a car fast, none of that stuff is going to matter nearly as much as being able to communicate with people. Young people need to be able to communicate and talk to people under stressful situations, be able to talk to people. And unfortunately, just the way our culture is now, it's not that conducive to learning that skill. So people who want to get into this profession and be successful better look for ways and opportunities to do that. Yeah.
I think that could help everybody, learning how to de-escalate a situation with all the tension that's going on in our culture.
Yeah.
And learning how to not take everything as an insult. You guys do a wonderful job at that. So I think we could all learn something from watching how good police officers interact with folks who aren't easy to deal with.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I hope that's true. Yeah. And I hope that, people look for those good interactions and not get so caught up in the
one or two
that are on YouTube. Yeah.
Good point. Thank you, Travis. It was a great conversation. We're grateful for you guys, for everybody in your department, all over the state, all over the country, taking care of all of us here in this great country we have, and keep doing what you're doing. We support you. We appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate that support. Could I just tell one more quick story?
You bet.
Just to speak to the support that you just talked about. I had a situation that happened not long ago that it was a little thing, but it illustrated to me kind of the dynamic that we have going right now. And that is, I was walking through the parking lot where we park our patrol cars into our building, and we share the building with court upstairs. And as I was walking in the back door, a car with two guys in it drove past me. It looked like they dressed like they had just left court maybe. And as they drove past me, they yell, and I look over, and they both flip me off as they drive out of our parking lot. I walk in the back door of our police department, and immediately overhead, our dispatcher is asking if somebody's available to come up to the lobby and take some cookies from a mom and her little girl who had come in to give us some cookies that they'd made. And it just struck me in that moment how polarized our world is. And it was just striking that, we have these two extremes, and honestly, for the most part, the police would just like to land in the middle somewhere. And, but we really do appreciate the support. So thank you for that.
When you get it. So I'll bet, if you could focus on that and try to forget about those couple of guys who flipped you off for no reason.
Yeah.
Matter of 30 seconds. After you, here's some cookies.
Yeah, you're the best. Anyway, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it, Travis.
All right.
Thanks for joining us today, folks. And check the show notes out. Get a hold of us anytime you'd like to have a conversation. We'll talk to you again next time. Signing out.
Thank you for listening to Harnessing Your Wealth with Billy Peterson. Before we declare the race official, please click the follow button so you can be notified when new episodes become available. For more information about today's show, please check out the show notes. Visit our website at www.petersonws.com or give us a call at 801-475-4002. Once again, thank you for listening. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Peterson Wealth Services. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.